Thursday, June 1, Grace for Obedience. The woman in scarlet and purple, riding on the scarlet-coloured beast, has passed around her wine cup, and the world is drunk with Babylon's false doctrines. Speaking of the wine of Babylon, Ellen G. White makes this clear comment. What is that wine? Her false doctrines. She has given to the world a false Sabbath instead of the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, and has repeated the falsehood that Satan first told to Eve in Eden, the natural immortality of the soul. And that's from an article titled Let the Trumpet Give a Certain Sound in the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald of December 6, 1892. These erroneous teachings have deceived millions. As a result, God is giving his people, still entrenched in error, a final last-day appeal. Read Revelation 18, verses 4 and 5. What is God's appeal to multitudes still in fallen religious organizations? Revelation 18, beginning at verse 4, And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. As we already have seen, but worth repeating, many of God's people are in religious organizations that have compromised biblical teachings. They do not understand the truths of Scripture. God's loving appeal is straightforward. In Revelation 18, verse 4, he says, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. Read 1 John 3:4 and compare it to Romans 14:23. How does the Bible define sin? How do these Bible passages harmonize? 1 John 3:4, Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. And Romans 14:23, But he who doubts is condemned if he eats, because he does not eat from faith, for whatever is not from faith is sin. Sin is the transgression or the breaking of God's law. The only way anybody can obey the law is through faith in the power of the living Christ. We are weak, frail, faltering, sinful human beings. By faith, when we accept Christ, his grace atones for our past and empowers our present. He gives us grace and apostleship for obedience, as it says in Romans 1, verse 5. Heaven's appeal to his people in churches that do not respect and obey the law of God is to step out by faith. His appeal to Adventists in Sabbath-keeping congregations is to forsake all self-centered human attempts at obedience and live godly lives by faith in the grace of Christ, which delivers us from sin's condemnation and its domination. And just as Israel's faithfulness to the law in Deuteronomy 4:6 would have been a powerful witness to the world, our faithfulness too can be a powerful witness and help guide people out of Babylon. So let's finish with Deuteronomy 4, verse 6. Therefore, be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. And you can listen and watch at the same time on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.